Marcus Chen had learned to tune out the hum of his neural interface during court proceedings, but sitting in his cramped public defender's office at 7 in the evening, the device wouldn't stop buzzing against his temple. 43 missed calls. All from Derek. He pulled the translucent display away from his ear and let it hover in front of him, the holographic caller ID cycling through his brother's increasingly frantic contact attempts. The last voicemail transcript materialized in the air. Grandma Rose is gone. Well, reading is Friday at Huang Associates. Try to look presentable for once. And Marcus, disabled at poverty mode interface filter. It's embarrassing. Marcus stared at the words until they dissolved into pixels. The office around him was outdated by modern standards. Physical case files still lined the shelves because the city's budget for holographic storage had been cut 3 years ago. His desk was real wood, scratched and coffee-stained, an antique in an age when most furniture was programmable smart matter that could shift shapes on command. Through the window, New Seattle's vertical gardens climbed buildings that touched the clouds, their bioluminescent leaves casting green shadows across the street below. Delivery drones wove between towers like metal birds, their status tier badges glowing gold, platinum, or the rare diamond white reserved for the ultra-wealthy. His own drone clearance was bronze. He couldn't even order food to the upper-level restaurants. The photo frame on his desk still used old-school digital display technology, another relic. The image showed him and Grandma Rose in her rooftop garden, both laughing, dirt on their hands despite the soil-free hydroponic systems most people used now. She'd insisted on real dirt. Plants know the difference, she'd said. People do too. Next to it, a newer photo, his courthouse wedding 6 months ago. He was kissing Sofia Martinez, both of them in simple clothing. Her dress was off the rack, his suit was rented. No hollow filters, no augmented reality enhancements, no livestream to boost their social credit scores. Just 2 people and a judge who'd waived the ceremonial fee because Marcus had once gotten his daughter out of a possession charge. The door opened without knocking. Sophia stepped in carrying 2 cups of actual coffee, not the synthetic stuff from the dispensers, and her own neural interface was powered down completely, leaving a faint circle on her temple where the device usually sat. She set his cup down and perched on the edge of his desk, her social worker's badge still clipped to her collar. The badge was outdated too, lacking the holographic verification strip that marked someone as currently employed by a top-tier agency. You saw, she said. It wasn't a question. Derek's already circling, Marcus said. He reached for the coffee and their fingers brushed. Even after 6 months of marriage, the contact sent electricity through him. He thinks he's getting the bulk of it. Your grandmother knew who loved her. Sophia's voice was gentle but firm. She'd always had that quality, the ability to be soft and unmovable at the same time. And she knew who showed up. Marcus pulled up his calendar display with a finger gesture, the holoscreen flickering to life between them. Friday. 3 days away. He started to close it, then stopped. I told Derek you're coming to the reading. Sophia's posture changed, her spine straightening almost imperceptibly. The Chin family had never acknowledged their marriage. To them, she was still the housekeeper who'd worked in their home for 8 years, back before she'd finished her degree through night school while working 3 jobs. They'd never learned her last name. Never asked about her family. Never wondered why she sometimes arrived with bruises from breaking up fights at the youth shelter where she volunteered. Marcus. She set down her coffee. They don't even know we're together. They think you're just, what? Eccentric? The family disappointment who chose the poor people over his trust fund. He'd given up his trust fund at 25, the day he'd decided to become a public defender instead of joining his father's corporate law firm. Derek had called him an idiot. Aunt Linda had called him worse. His father had died 6 months later, a stroke brought on by stress from managing the family's social credit portfolio, and somehow Marcus's choice had become the family's favorite story about his failure. They're about to find out. Marcus stood and moved around the desk. The office was small enough that 2 steps brought him directly in front of her. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering at the place where her neural interface would sit if she'd had it activated. I'm done hiding the best thing in my life. your family will eat me alive. But Sophia was leaning into his touch. I spent 8 years watching them treat you like you were invisible. He moved closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Grandma Rose saw you. I see you. Friday, everyone else will too, and then what? Derek contests the will? Linda hires a reputation assassination firm? Your brother's wife livestreams the whole thing to her 3 million followers and brands me as a gold digger? Sophia's breath was warm against his face. I've seen how your family operates, Marcus. I cleaned their offices. I know what they're capable of, so do I. He closed the remaining distance and kissed her, deep and urgent, the way he'd wanted to kiss her for years before that night in the hospital. The night everything changed, the memory surfaced unbidden, 4 years ago, arriving at the Chen family mansion for Sunday dinner. He'd found Sophia in the kitchen, her interface projecting a message in the air in front of her, a calendar reminder that it was her birthday. Her face was streaked with tears. The family had just left for an expensive restaurant in the Platinum District, the kind of place that required a minimum social credit score just to make a reservation. Family only, Derek had said, not even looking at her as he'd climbed into his auto-driving Mercedes with the custom gold trim. Marcus had sat beside her on the kitchen floor, among the dirty dishes and discarded napkins. Tell me about your birthday. The real one. When you were a kid, she'd told him about her mother's flan recipe, passed down through 3 generations. About neighborhood block parties where everyone brought food and nobody checked credit scores or interface status. About a world that had mostly disappeared as the city had stratified into its current rigid tiers, platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and the no-status zones where interfaces were black market and food came from 3D printers loaded with synthetic paste. Next Sunday, he'd said, we're getting flan. Just us, that's not appropriate, she'd started. Appropriate? He'd laughed, bitter. My family doesn't know what that word means. But I do. And it's not appropriate that the kindest person in this house eats alone on her birthday. The spark had ignited then, though it would be another 3 years and 9 months before they acted on it. 3 years of stolen glances during family dinners he'd stopped attending regularly. 3 years of finding excuses to visit Grandma Rose on the days Sophia would be there. 3 years of her leaving little notes tucked in his jacket pocket, reminders about court cases, encouraging words on hard days. Tiny acts of care that his own family had never thought to offer. Now, in his office with the city lights turning on outside as evening deepened, Sophia pulled back from the kiss. I need to tell you something. The way she said it made Marcus's stomach tighten. What? Your grandmother's lawyer contacted me yesterday. Sent an encrypted message to my personal interface, not the family network. Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out a data chip, physical storage, old school and untraceable. She wanted me to have this before the reading. Said I'd know when to use it. Marcus took the chip. It was smaller than his thumbnail, unmarked except for a tiny rose etched into its surface. Grandma Rose's signature. Did you open it? It's coded to your DNA. And mine. Sophia's expression was unreadable. Marcus, what did she do? I don't know. But he had a suspicion, and it made his heart race. She was planning something. Those last few months, she kept asking me questions about Derek's business. About Linda's real estate deals. About who really showed up when she needed help. She kept a notebook, Sophia said quietly. Asked me to write things down. Dates, times, conversations. I thought she was just, I don't know, wanting to remember things. But now it sounds like she was building a case. Marcus turned the chip over in his fingers. Against her own family. For her real family. Sophia took his hand. Marcus, whatever's on that chip, whatever happens Friday, you need to be ready. Derek won't go down easy. None of them will. Through the window, an advertising drone swept past, its holographic display cycling through luxury products, smart matter clothing that adjusted to your body in real time, neural upgrades that could boost your cognitive processing by 40%, vacation packages to the lunar resorts. All of it available only to gold tier and above. The drone sensor swept the office and, finding no high-value targets, moved on without even displaying the full ad. Marcus powered down his interface completely, feeling the slight tingle as the neural connection disengaged. Without it, the city looked different. Quieter. The constant stream of social updates, credit score notifications, and status alerts disappeared, leaving just the physical world in its increasingly rare unaugmented state. Friday, he said, where whatever makes you feel powerful. Not what they expect. Not what they'd approve of. What makes you feel like yourself. Sophia smiled, and it was the smile that had first made him realize he was in love with her, the one that said she saw through all his family's bullshit and chose him anyway. I was thinking about that dress. The one from the shelter benefit last year. The red one, the one Derek's wife said was charmingly vintage when she meant poor. Marcus pulled Sophia closer. Perfect. Wear that one, you're going to start a war, no. He kissed her forehead, then her temple where her interface sat dormant. Grandma Rose already started it. We're just showing up for the final battle. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other while the city hummed outside. Somewhere in a platinum tower, Derek was probably celebrating, already planning how to spend an inheritance he assumed was his. Aunt Linda was likely scheduling renovation consultations for Grandma Rose's house, planning to flip it for 3 times its value. Vanessa was probably live-streaming to her followers about family legacy and old money, building her brand on the back of a woman she'd barely spoken to in 5 years. None of them knew what was coming. None of them had spent Tuesday afternoons for 8 years sitting with an old woman in her garden, listening to stories about immigration and survival and the difference between wealth and worth. None of them had held her hand at 2 in the morning when she couldn't breathe and the emergency dispatch system wanted to verify her insurance tier before sending help. None of them had loved her for who she was instead of what she could give them. Marcus's interface buzzed against his temple even though he'd powered it down. Priority override, family network only. He reactivated it with a thought and Derek's face appeared in holographic form, his expression tight with practiced grief. Finally, Derek said. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Mother wants everyone at the estate tonight. Family dinner before the reading. She's insisting. Mother was how Derek still referred to his wife Vanessa, a slip from when his first marriage had ended and he'd briefly dated someone he'd called mother material before settling on Vanessa's 3 million followers instead. Marcus had stopped correcting him. I'll be there, Marcus said. Alone, I assume? Derek's hologram flickered with bad connection. He was probably in one of the basement levels of his dealership where the signal was weakest. This is immediate family only. Sophia's coming. The pause stretched long enough that Marcus thought the connection had dropped. Then Derek's face reappeared, closer now, as if he'd leaned into the camera. The help? Marcus, this is not the time for your charity cases. This is about Grandma Rose's legacy, about the family business, about inheritance, Marcus finished. I know. Sophia's coming, she is not family, she's my wife. Marcus kept his voice level, conversational. Has been for 6 months. You'd know that if you'd returned any of my calls since the wedding. Another long pause. Then, you married the maid. I married a social worker with a master's degree in clinical psychology who happens to have more integrity in her little finger than this entire family combined. Marcus watched his brother's holographic face cycle through several expressions: shock, disgust, calculation. We'll be there at 7, Vanessa will have a field day with this. Her followers can watch her make a fool of herself on livestream, same as always. Marcus disconnected before Derek could respond. Sophia was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You told him, ripped off the bandage. Marcus pocketed the data chip. No point waiting. He'd find out Friday anyway. Your family is going to implode. Good. It's been overdue for years. He pulled her up from the desk and into his arms. You still sure about this? We could skip town. I hear the no-status zones in the Pacific Northwest are nice this time of year. No credit scores. No neural surveillance, just people living actual lives, and abandon your grandmother's final wishes? Whatever's on that chip? Sophia shook her head. Not a chance. Besides, someone needs to make sure Derek doesn't have an aneurysm during the will reading. Medical emergencies are expensive without gold-tier insurance. You're cruel. I love it, I learned from the best. She kissed him quickly, then pulled back. But Marcus, whatever happens Friday, whatever's in that will, I need you to promise me something, anything. Don't let them make you into them. Don't let their poison turn you into the kind of person who measures worth by credit scores and social capital. Her hands cupped his face, thumbs brushing his cheekbones. You're the only good thing that family ever produced. Stay that way, I have you. Kind of hard to turn into an asshole when your wife would call you on it immediately, damn right. Sophia grabbed her bag and headed for the door, then paused. 7 o'clock, I'll pick you up at 6:30. Gives us time to prepare our armor. My armor is a vintage dress and spite, sounds perfect. Marcus watched her leave, then turned back to his desk. The data chip sat next to the photo of Grandma Rose, the tiny etched rose catching the light. He picked it up, feeling its weight, insignificant in grams, potentially explosive in content, whatever you did. Grandma, he thought, I hope you knew what you were starting. His interface buzzed again. This time it was Aunt Linda, her message curt, heard the news about your ill-advised marriage. Expecting you both tonight. Dress codes will be enforced. Don't embarrass the family more than you already have. Marcus deleted the message without responding. The family estate was in the Gold District, a sprawling compound that took up an entire city block. Security drones patrolled the perimeter with facial recognition that would flag Sophia as domestic staff unless he updated her credentials. He pulled up the estate's access system and, using his admin privileges that Derek had never thought to revoke, changed Sophia's classification to family priority access. The system flagged the change immediately, sending an alert to Derek. Marcus smiled. Let him see it. Let him start panicking now. His interface calendar populated with the evening schedule. Leave office at 6. Pick up Sophia at 6:30. Arrive at estate at 7. Endure whatever torture Derek and Aunt Linda had planned. Try not to let Vanessa's followers get any footage that could be weaponized into reputation damage. Protect Sophia from the family's particular brand of sophisticated cruelty, and wonder what secrets Grandma Rose had left on a chip so small it could disappear between couch cushions, but so important she'd coded it to both their DNA. Marcus powered down his interface again and sat in the silence of his office. Through the window, New Seattle continued its endless cycle, drones delivering to those who could afford it, street-level crowds moving between the few remaining public spaces, the upper towers glowing with holographic advertisements for lives most people would never lead. Somewhere in that vertical maze, Sophia was probably heading home to their modest apartment in the Silver District, the place they'd chosen together because it had real windows instead of programmable screens and a landlord who didn't run credit checks every month. Somewhere else in that same maze, Derek was panicking, calculating, trying to figure out how Marcus marrying the help would affect his inheritance prospects. Vanessa was probably already crafting the narrative for her followers, how to spin it as either a heartwarming family acceptance story or a cautionary tale about gold diggers, depending on which would get more engagement. And in a law office across town, Richard Huang probably sat with Grandma Rose's will, knowing exactly what chaos was about to unfold, waiting for Friday with the patience of someone who'd seen this particular family drama play out across generations. Marcus stood and gathered his things, the few case files that couldn't be left in the office overnight, his personal interface backup drive, the data chip that he slipped into a pocket so small and hidden that even a full body scan wouldn't find it. He locked the office and took the stairs instead of the elevator, needing the physical activity to ground himself. 47 floors down, his footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell, and he could almost hear Grandma Rose's voice. They'll come at you with everything they have, Marcus. Money, status, social pressure, that special chin family talent for making you feel small. But remember, they're paper tigers. All flash, no substance. And paper burns. He'd asked her once why she'd never left, never divorced herself from a family that seemed to value profit over people. She'd smiled that knowing smile and said, because someone had to stay and remind them what real wealth looks like. And because I wanted to be here for the good ones. The ones who might grow up different. She'd meant him, he realized now. She'd stayed for him. The ground floor opened onto a street market that had sprung up in the shadow of the corporate towers, vendors selling real food, handmade goods, things you couldn't 3D print or order from algorithmic recommendations. Marcus bought 2 pork buns from a woman who'd been there for 20 years, who'd once told him she'd known his grandmother back before the family had money. The old woman smiled at him, no interface port in her temple, no credit score hovering over her head. She was proud of you, the vendor said, not specifying who she was but not needing to. Said you were the only one who remembered what matters. Marcus paid with physical currency, old-fashioned bills that were technically still legal but rarely used, and left a tip that made the old woman's eyes widen. She taught me well, walking to his car, a 15-year-old Honda that ran on hydrogen cells and required manual driving because he'd never upgraded to the full AI system. Marcus thought about Friday. About standing in Richard Huang's office while his family's careful social architecture came crashing down. About Sophia beside him, holding his hand, facing people who'd once paid her $18 an hour and thought that was generous. About whatever bomb Grandma Rose had planted in her will, timed to detonate at precisely the moment when Derek would be most confident, most certain of his victory. The drive home took him through 3 districts, each one a visible step down in status. Gold District with its perfect streets and building-sized advertisements. Silver District where he and Sophia lived, where things were clean but unpolished, functional but not flashy. Bronze District where most of his clients lived, where the streets had potholes and the buildings had real graffiti instead of the curated urban art that the upper districts paid for. And beyond that, barely visible from the elevated highway, the no-status zones where the city pretended people didn't live but where Marcus knew actual communities thrived without the constant pressure of credit scores and social ranking. Where people helped each other because algorithms hadn't yet figured out how to monetize basic human decency. He parked in the underground garage of their building and took the elevator to the 23rd floor. Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen-living room combination that would have fit in the foyer of Derek's house. But it was theirs, paid for with their own work, filled with things they'd chosen instead of things an interior AI had selected for optimal social presentation. Sophia was already home, the red dress laid out on the bed. She was in the shower, and Marcus could hear her singing something in Spanish, her voice echoing off the tile. He smiled and set the pork buns on the kitchen counter, then pulled out his interface to check the news feeds. Derek's dealership was struggling, that much was public knowledge. But running a deeper search through the business databases Marcus had access to as a lawyer, he found something interesting. Derek had taken out loans against his expected inheritance. Substantial loans. The kind that came due regardless of whether the inheritance materialized. Aunt Linda's real estate empire looked solid on the surface. But her private investment portfolio showed heavy leveraging. She'd been buying properties on speculation, counting on Grandma Rose's estate to provide the capital for the next phase of development. Vanessa's social media empire, 3 million followers, brand partnerships, sponsored content that pulled in 6 figures annually, was built entirely on the appearance of old money and family legacy. Take away the Chen family connection, and she was just another influencer in a saturated market. They'd all been betting on an inheritance they'd assumed was theirs. They'd all been wrong. Marcus closed the searches and pocketed his interface. Sophia emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel. Her hair wet and smelling like the jasmine soap she preferred, real flowers, not synthetic scent. "You're smiling," she said. "That's either very good or very bad. I'm imagining Derek's face on Friday." Marcus pulled her close, not caring about getting his clothes wet. "And I'm thinking about how Grandma Rose probably planned every second of this. She had almost a year after her diagnosis." Sophia's fingers traced patterns on his chest. Plenty of time to be thorough, plenty of time to be absolutely diabolical. He kissed her, tasting mint toothpaste and jasmine and the particular flavor that was uniquely Sophia. "We should eat. Big night ahead, big week ahead." But she didn't pull away. "Marcus, whatever happens, we're good, right? You and me? "This isn't going to change things, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." He said it simply, stating fact. Derek could inherit everything and it wouldn't change that. Linda could somehow steal the house and it wouldn't matter. "Because I have you, and you have me, and that's worth more than any of their paper wealth." "Good answer." She kissed him again, deeper this time. "Now feed me before I have to face your family on an empty stomach." "I need strength for battle." They ate the pork buns standing in the kitchen, Sophia in her towel, Marcus still in his work clothes, talking about everything except the elephant in the room. She told him about a case she'd closed, a teenager she'd been working with for 6 months who'd finally agreed to family therapy. He told her about a client who'd gotten a job offer despite having a criminal record, and how he'd helped negotiate the employment contract to protect both sides. Normal life. Normal conversations. The kind of simple, genuine moments that his family would never understand because they were too busy optimizing everything for social capital. At 6:15, they started getting ready. Sophia's red dress looked even better than he remembered, vintage cut, probably from the 2020s, before smart fabrics had made all clothing adjustable and uniform. It hugged her body in ways that made Marcus forget about family dinners and inheritance drama for several very pleasant minutes. "Stop looking at me like that," she said, but she was smiling. "Can't help it." "You're stunning." He pulled on the suit he'd worn to Grandma Rose's birthday party 2 years ago, the last one before she'd gotten sick. It was nice enough for family events but deliberately not top tier. No smart fabric, no embedded interface ports, just a well-cut suit that had cost him a week's salary. "We look like we're going to our execution," Sophia observed, checking her reflection in the mirror. "We look like we're going to war." Marcus came up behind her, his hands on her waist, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "And we're going to win." The law office of Huang Associates occupied the 78th floor of a Platinum District tower. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of New Seattle that most people only saw in advertisements. Richard Huang's conference room was all smart glass and programmable surfaces, the kind of space that cost more per square foot than Marcus's entire apartment. The table itself was a holographic display waiting to be activated, currently showing a subtle pattern of cherry blossoms, a nod to Grandma Rose's Taiwanese heritage that Marcus suspected his family wouldn't even notice. Derek had arrived early, of course. He sat at the head of the table like he owned the place, his interface glowing gold at his temple, premium tier, the kind with real-time market updates and social credit monitoring. Vanessa was beside him, her own interface projecting a faint recording indicator. She was live-streaming this, Marcus realized. Not the audio, that would be illegal without consent, but her facial reactions, her carefully curated emotional journey through the reading of her husband's grandmother's will. 3 million followers watching her perform grief she'd never actually felt. Aunt Linda had claimed the other power position, her tablet already displaying property valuations for Grandma Rose's house. She'd done the math before even arriving. Marcus could see the numbers reflected in her interface display, multiplying and calculating as she ran scenarios for development potential. Marcus and Sophia entered together, and the room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You actually brought her," Derek said, not bothering to lower his voice. His interface flickered as he received what was probably a flood of messages from Vanessa's followers, alerted to the drama by her carefully raised eyebrow. "To a legal proceeding. About family assets. Sophia is family." Marcus guided her to seats on the opposite side of the table, deliberately choosing the side that put them with their backs to the window. He wanted Derek and Linda to have to look into the light to see them. Small tactical advantages mattered. "She's been more family than any of you for the past 8 years. She was the help." Vanessa's voice was syrupy, designed for her followers. "I mean, it's very sweet that Marcus has such a soft spot for the working class, but this is hardly the venue." "Mrs. Chen Martinez is listed on the attendance sheet," Richard Huang said, entering the room with the measured calm of someone who'd been a lawyer for 40 years. He carried an old-fashioned paper folder, the kind that predated digital records and couldn't be hacked or remotely accessed. Mrs. Rosechen specifically requested her presence. The silence that followed had weight. Marcus watched Derek's face cycle through confusion, calculation, and the first flicker of real concern. Aunt Linda's fingers froze over her tablet. Even Vanessa's streaming interface dimmed slightly as she tried to process this information. "That's impossible," Derek said finally. "Grandma barely knew her name. She was just the woman who sat with your grandmother every Tuesday for 8 years?" Richard opened the folder with deliberate care. "The woman who drove her to medical appointments when her own family was too busy?" "The woman Rose Chen specifically named as Marcus Chen's wife in documents dated 6 months ago, which she updated personally just 3 weeks before her passing." Marcus felt Sophia's hand find his under the table, her fingers trembling slightly. He squeezed back, a silent communication. "We're good. We've got this, let's begin," Richard said, settling into his chair. The table's surface activated, displaying a holographic rendering of Grandma Rose's will. The document was extensive. Marcus could see hundreds of pages that condensed into a scrolling display. Rose Chen, being of sound mind and body, executed this will on the 18th of March, 2025, and updated it on the 4th of April, 2025. She was evaluated by 3 independent physicians in the month before her passing. All confirmed complete mental competency. Derek leaned forward, his interface brightening as he activated recording mode. "This is standard. Get to the distributions. The estate is valued at approximately $543,000, Richard continued, his voice maddeningly even. "This includes Mrs. Chen's home at 432 Willow Street, valued at $400,000, and various financial accounts totaling the remainder." Aunt Linda's tablet screen showed her calculations updating in real time. Marcus could see her dividing the estate in half, assuming the traditional split between Derek and himself. She was already planning her pitch for why Derek should let her handle the real estate sale. "To my grandson Derek Chin." Richard read, and Derek's posture straightened. "I leave the sum of $50,000, with the following note." He paused, glancing up at Derek with an expression that might have been pity. "Since you always told me you were a self-made man, I'm sure this is all you need to rebuild whatever you've lost." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Derek's face went from confident to pale in the span of a heartbeat. 50,000? There's over $500,000 in the estate. The remainder," Richard continued, unperturbed, "is distributed as follows. To my grandson Marcus Chen, I leave $50,000 in cash in my home at 432 Willow Street, including all contents, furnishings, and the rooftop garden." The holographic display updated, showing the property transfer. Marcus watched the numbers materialize, watched his brother's face contort with rage and disbelief, watched Aunt Linda's tablet screen go dark as her calculations became worthless. "This is insane," Derek said, his voice rising. She was clearly not in her right mind. "We'll contest this. Linda, you're a witness." "Mrs. Chen was evaluated by 3 board-certified physicians," Richard repeated, his tone sharpening. "Including Dr. Sarah Kim, who you yourself hired to evaluate her competency 2 years ago when you wanted her to co-sign a business loan. Dr. Kim's assessment then, and her assessment a month before Mrs. Chen's death, was identical: completely lucid, sharp memory, and fully capable of making legal and financial decisions." Vanessa's interface was glowing now, her followers probably flooding her with messages. Her face had frozen in an expression of shock that Marcus suspected was genuine for once. There must be some mistake. Grandma Rose loved Derek. He was her favorite. She said many things, Richard interrupted smoothly. What she wrote, however, is what matters legally. And there's more. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The data chip in his pocket seemed to burn against his leg, its presence a constant reminder that whatever was happening now was just the opening act. "I'm giving my $50,000 to Sophia," Marcus said quietly. The words dropped into the chaos like stones into water, creating ripples that spread across the table. Derek stood so fast his chair, smart matter, self-adjusting, toppled backward before it could compensate. "You're giving our grandmother's money to the maid, to my wife," Marcus corrected, his voice level. "Who spent more time with Grandma Rose than all of you combined. This is gold digging at its finest," Vanessa hissed, her streaming interface flaring brighter. Her followers were eating this up, Marcus realized. This was content. This was drama. His family's implosion was entertainment for 3 million strangers. She worked here for 8 years, waiting for the old woman to die so she could. Careful, Sophia said, and her voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood slowly, reaching into her purse. You might want to think very carefully about what you say next. She pulled out a notebook, fabric-bound, old-fashioned, the kind that people used before everything had moved to digital interfaces. Marcus had seen it before, during those Tuesday afternoons, watching Grandma Rose dictate entries while Sophia wrote in her careful handwriting. What is that? Derek demanded. Your grandmother asked me to keep records, Sophia said, opening the notebook. The pages were dense with text. Dates, times. She said one day it might matter. She wanted someone to remember who actually showed up, keep track of what. Aunt Linda's voice had an edge of panic now. Sophia's fingers traced down a page. June 15, 2019. Derek, you promised to help your grandmother set up her new neural interface so she could video chat with her sister in Taiwan. You never showed. She sat in this very building's lobby for 4 hours waiting for you, until I finished my shift and found her there. I was busy, Derek started, December 8, 2020. Sophia's voice remained steady, factual. Linda, you were supposed to drive Rose to her cancer screening at New Seattle Medical. You sent an automated car instead because you had an important showing. Your grandmother sat in that waiting room alone, terrified, and found out she was in remission with no family there to share the news. Aunt Linda's face had gone red. How dare you? You're a disgruntled employee trying to. March 23, 2021. Sophia turned another page. Derek, you borrowed $30,000 from your grandmother for inventory at the dealership. You said it was temporary. She never saw it again. April 2022, you asked for $50,000 more. She gave it to you. You promised to pay her back within 6 months. You never did. That's a lie, Derek sputtered, but his interface was flickering in a way that suggested he was receiving urgent messages. Probably from his accountant. Marcus thought. Probably confirming that yes, those loans were documented, and no, they'd never been repaid. Actually, Richard said, pulling another document from his folder, I have the records. Mrs. Chen documented every loan, every promise, every missed visit. She was quite thorough. He slid a holographic display across the table. The numbers materialized in the air between them, undeniable. $80,000 over 3 years, all marked as loans, all with Derek's digital signature acknowledging the debt. Marcus watched his brother's face, saw the moment Derek realized he'd been caught. Saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Could he spin this? Could he claim it was a misunderstanding? But the evidence was there. Floating in the air, impossible to deny. But Marcus, Sophia continued, her voice gentler now. Marcus came every Sunday for 7 years. Brought groceries he couldn't afford on a public defender's salary. Sat with her in the garden, the real one with actual dirt. Fixed her fence when the smart repair service said it wasn't worth the fee. Listened to stories about her childhood in Taiwan, about her late husband, about her regrets. She paused, looking at Derek. He never asked for anything. Never expected anything. He just showed up. This is manipulation, Vanessa said, but her voice had lost its confidence. Her streaming interface was dimming. She'd probably shut it down, realizing this wasn't the kind of content her followers wanted. This wasn't aspirational grief. This was family ugliness exposed. There's a letter, Richard said. Mrs. Chen requested I read it aloud if there were complications. He glanced at Derek's overturned chair, at Aunt Linda's white-knuckled grip on her tablet. I think we've met that threshold. He pulled out another document, this one on actual paper, aged slightly. Grandma Rose's handwriting covered the page in neat rows, the characters a mix of English and Chinese. If you're hearing this, Richard read, and Marcus could hear his grandmother's voice in the words, Derek is probably throwing a tantrum. Son, you always were dramatic. Let me tell you all a story about love. The room had gone silent. Even Derek had stopped trying to interrupt, his face frozen somewhere between rage and confusion. 8 years ago, I hired Sofia Martinez to help around my house. From day one, I watched my family treat her like furniture. Invisible. Less than. But Marcus? Richard paused, looking at Marcus over the page. Marcus saw her immediately. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. Sophia's hand tightened and is under the table. I watched him fall in love over 4 years. Richard continued. Little things. He'd find excuses to be home when she was there. He'd ask about her day. Her dreams. Her mother's flan recipe. He looked at her the way my Henry used to look at me, like she was the only real thing in a room full of pretense. Vanessa made a small sound, quickly suppressed. Her interface flickered back on briefly, then off again. Marcus could imagine her followers' reactions, the comments flooding in. This wasn't the story they'd expected. And Sophia? Richard read. Oh, Sophia tried so hard to hide it. But I saw. The way her whole face changed when his car pulled up. The way she learned his coffee order, his favorite meals. The way she left little notes for him, reminders about court cases. Encouraging words on hard days, tucked in his old jacket pocket. Sophia's cheeks were flushed now. Marcus squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement. Grandma Rose had seen everything. Of course she had. For 4 years, they danced around each other. Too proper. Too afraid. Marcus thought she deserved better than a broke public defender. Sophia thought she wasn't good enough for the Chin family. Richard's voice carried a note of warmth now. Then came February 14, 2023. Valentine's Day. But for me, it was the day I couldn't breathe. The memory hit Marcus like a physical force. 2 in the morning. The call from Sophia, her voice trying to stay calm but terror bleeding through. The drive through a winter storm. His old Honda's heater barely working, for hours of white-knuckled driving with his heart in his throat. I called Sophia at 2 a.m., Richard read. I was terrified. Couldn't get air. She came immediately, off the clock, in her pajamas. Drove me to the emergency room. Held my hand. Made jokes about how we were both too stubborn to die. Marcus could see it again, the hospital room, harsh fluorescent lights, machines beeping. Grandma Rose in the bed, oxygen mask on, Sophia beside her holding her hand and telling terrible jokes that made the old woman's eyes crinkle with silent laughter. While she kept me calm, she called Marcus. He left his apartment and drove 4 hours through a winter storm to get there. Walked into that hospital room at 6 a.m., soaking wet, terrified. He'd been soaking wet. His interface had malfunctioned from the moisture, leaving him disconnected from navigation, from traffic updates, from everything except the road and his fear. He'd driven manually the whole way, hands cramping on the wheel. He saw me in the bed. He saw Sophia holding my hand. And I saw something break open in him. Richard paused, letting the words settle. Marcus could feel every eye in the room on him, could sense the shift in atmosphere. This wasn't about money anymore. This was something else entirely. I pretended to be asleep. Closed my eyes. Shallow breathing. I wanted to see what would happen. A laugh escaped Marcus before he could stop it. Of course she had. Grandma Rose, ever the tactician, had played dead to watch her grandson finally admit the truth. Marcus sat beside Sophia. Took her other hand. Richard's voice had dropped, becoming almost intimate. He was reading the words, but he was also performing them, Marcus realized. Giving them the weight they deserved. The hospital room came back to him in vivid detail. The smell of antiseptic and fear. Sophia's hand in his, her fingers cold from the emergency room's aggressive air conditioning. Grandma Rose's heart monitor beeping steady and strong, despite her closed eyes and shallow breathing. I can't do this anymore. Marcus had whispered, his voice breaking on the words. He'd thought Grandma Rose was asleep, thought it was just him and Sophia in the pre-dawn quiet. Do what? Sophia had asked, her eyes red from crying, mascara smudged. Pretend I don't love you. The words had poured out of him, for years of restraint finally shattering. I've loved you for 4 years, Sophia. 4 years of watching you be brilliant and kind and everything my family isn't. 4 years of wanting to kiss you and knowing I shouldn't because you work for my grandmother and my family would crucify you and, Marcus, Sophia had started, but he'd kept going. I'm done being afraid. Grandma Rose almost died tonight. And all I could think in that car was, what if I die tomorrow? What if I never tell you? What if you never know that you're the reason I come home? That you're the bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever met. Richard was reading this now, in front of Derek and Vanessa and Aunt Linda, in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with their Platinum District view. Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, but Sophia's hand in his kept him grounded. I'm just a housekeeper, Sophia had said in that hospital room, and Marcus had pulled her closer. You're a woman putting herself through graduate school while working 2 jobs. You're someone who drops everything at 2 a.m. to save an old woman who isn't even your family. You're someone my grandmother loves more than her own grandchildren because you have something we don't, actual character. He'd pulled her close then, forehead to forehead, breathing the same air. The heart monitor had beeped steady behind them. I don't have money. I don't have status. I drive a car that's old enough to vote. But I love you. And if you'd let me, I'd spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. I've loved you since the birthday you bought me flan, Sophia had whispered back, and then they'd kissed, deep, desperate, for years of longing finally unleashed. Behind them, Grandma Rose's heart monitor had continued its steady rhythm, and the faintest smile had crossed her supposedly sleeping face. About damn time, she'd said, I still closed, barely audible. Now ask her properly, Marcus. They'd both jumped, realizing she'd been awake the whole time. Marcus had started laughing through his tears, relief and joy and embarrassment flooding through him all at once. Grandma, he'd started, but she'd opened her eyes, grinning despite the oxygen mask. I didn't almost die just to miss this. Ask her, and he had, right there in the hospital room, still in his wet coat, no ring, just love and fear and hope. Sophia had said yes while holding Grandma Rose's hand. The old woman had held both their hands and said, This is what love looks like. Remember I said that. Richard finished reading the passage and looked up. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Even Vanessa's interface had gone completely dark. That's why the courthouse wedding didn't bother me, Richard continued. You two had already made your vows in room 304, with me as your witness. Everything else was just paperwork. Marcus saw Derek's face, saw something shift there. Not understanding, not yet, but the beginning of realization that he'd missed something fundamental. Derek, Vanessa, Linda, you all skipped the courthouse ceremony. Said it wasn't appropriate for the family. You know what's not appropriate? Missing the happiest day of someone's life because you're embarrassed by who they chose to love. Aunt Linda looked down at her tablet. Vanessa's hand moved to her interface, then dropped away. That woman, Sophia, is worth more than all your luxury cars and vacation homes and designer handbags combined. She has character. Integrity. Love. Marcus chose love over status. Derek, you chose status and got debt. The final sentence hung in the air like a verdict. Derek's face had gone from red to white, his interface flickering rapidly as messages flooded in. Marcus could guess what they were, creditors, probably, alerted by the mention of debt. Or maybe his accountant, confirming what was about to be exposed. This is insane, Derek said, his voice hollow. She manipulated an old woman. Mrs. Chen also left documentation of your financial situation, Derek. Richard pulled another folder from his stack. She hired a private investigator. Quite thorough work, actually. He slid a physical document across the table. The numbers were damning, Marcus could see them even from his position. $380,000 in debt. The dealership hemorrhaging money. Lease payments overdue on the Mercedes. Foreclosure proceedings scheduled to begin next month on the McMansion. What? Vanessa turned to Derek, her voice sharp. You said we were doing great. You said the business was booming. You said, I was handling it, Derek said, his voice desperate. The inheritance was supposed to cover it. I just needed the inheritance Mrs. Chen already gave you, Richard interrupted. $80,000 over 3 years, never repaid. She knew you'd squander anything else. Vanessa stood, her movements jerky. She grabbed her purse, her interface shutting down completely. I can't, I need to. She didn't finish the sentence, just walked out, her heels clicking on the smart glass floor. Derek called after her, but she was already gone. Marcus watched his brother slump back into his chair. The smart matter had righted itself automatically, looking smaller somehow. Diminished, this is still contestable, Aunt Linda tried, but her voice lacked conviction. The house alone is worth. The house was transferred to Marcus's name 3 months before Mrs. Chen's death, Richard said. Completely legal. All taxes paid, all documentation filed with the city. Sophia Martinez Chen was listed as co-owner 6 months ago. Immediately following their marriage, Sophia spoke for the first time since pulling out the notebook, her voice soft. She told me the week before she died. Said, Sophia, this house has been cold for too long. Fill it with warmth. Have babies. Grow a garden. Make it a home, not a museum. Derek looked up at Marcus, and for the first time in years, Marcus saw his brother without the armor. Without the confidence, the bravado, the carefully constructed image. Just a man who'd bet everything on an inheritance that had never been his to claim. I'm her grandson, Derek said, and he sounded broken. I'm blood, Marcus stood, pulling Sophia up with him. Blood doesn't mean family, Derek. Sophia was more family to Grandma Rose in 8 years than you were in 42. You're really going to give her that money? 50 grand, every penny. Marcus looked at Sophia, saw the tears on her cheeks, saw the strength in her eyes. She earned it listening to this family for 8 years. They turned to leave. The meeting was over, the will was read, the inheritance distributed. Aunt Linda was already on her interface, probably calling lawyers who would tell her what Richard had already confirmed. The will was ironclad. Derek slumped in his chair, his interface dark, his carefully constructed life crumbling around him. Marcus had almost reached the door when Richard spoke up. Wait. The lawyer's voice carried a note of something Marcus couldn't quite identify. There's one more envelope. Mrs. Chen left specific instructions. I was to give this to Sophia and Marcus privately, but given the circumstances. He paused, looking at Derek and Linda. Given what's already been revealed, I think she'd want you all to see this. He pulled out a sealed envelope, cream-colored paper with a red wax seal. Grandma Rose's personal seal, the one she'd used for important documents. Richard held it out to Sophia. Sophia took it with trembling hands. Marcus moved beside her, his hand on the small of her back, feeling her spine straighten as she broke the seal. Inside was another letter, this one shorter, and a small dated chip, the twin to the one still burning in Marcus's pocket. Sophia read silently first, her eyes moving across the page, and Marcus watched her expression shift from confusion to shock to something that looked like joy mixed with grief. She looked up at him, then at Richard, then at Derek and Linda still frozen at the table. Read it, Marcus said softly. She wanted them to hear it. Sophia's voice shook as she began. My dearest Sophia and Marcus, if you're reading this in front of my family, then Richard followed my instructions. Good. They need to hear this. The office tower's glass walls reflected the afternoon sun, turning the entire 47th floor into a prism of white light. Marcus Chen stood near the rear of Richard Hahn's conference room, his cheap synthetic blend suit jacket rough against his wrists, while his brother Derek commanded the center space like he'd paid for the air itself. The room smelled of expensive coffee and the faint ozone scent of the holographic display units embedded in the titanium table. Sophia Martinez sat 2 chairs away from Marcus, her posture perfect, her hands folded over a slim tablet. She'd worn the charcoal dress he'd bought her for their courthouse wedding 6 months ago, the one with the modest neckline that somehow made her look like she belonged in rooms like this. No one else knew about the wedding. No one else knew about the 4 years before it, the stolen kisses in Grandma Rose's kitchen, the way Sophia's laugh had become the only sound that made sense in his chaotic world. Derek paced near the window wall, his augmented reality contact lenses flickering with stock tickers and social credit scores. His wife Vanessa perched on a chair like she was posing for a lifestyle feed, her neural jewelry glinting at her temples. Aunt Linda had claimed the seat closest to Richard's desk, her fingers dancing over her tablet as she live-streamed the proceedings to her subscriber base. "This is a waste of premium time," Derek said, his voice carrying the artificial confidence of someone who'd been raised on participation metrics and engagement scores. Mother was 87 and hadn't updated her digital presence in 3 years. "Whatever assets exist are probably depreciated beyond relevance." Richard Hahn, silver-haired and deliberately analog in his paper-loving ways, set down his actual ceramic coffee cup. "Your grandmother updated her will extensively 6 months ago. Every clause was reviewed by 3 independent AI legal systems and notarized through blockchain verification." Marcus watched Derek's jaw tighten. His brother's smartwatch was probably spiking with stress hormones, broadcasting his irritation to whatever health monitoring service he subscribed to. "6 months ago," Vanessa said, her voice honey-sweet and completely artificial. "That's when Marcus disappeared for 2 weeks. Remember, Derek?" He said it was a case overload at the public defender's office. Sophia's fingers didn't move on her tablet, but Marcus saw the slight tension in her shoulders. They'd taken those 2 weeks for their honeymoon, a cabin in the mountains with no network coverage and no family obligations. They'd told Grandma Rose everything, and she'd cried and hugged Sophia and said, finally someone with sense." "I was working," Marcus said quietly. "You're always working," Linda chimed in without looking up from her streaming feed. "Such dedication to the underclass. Very noble. Grandma loved that about you, even if it meant you lived like you were the charity case." Richard cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The holographic display activated, and Grandma Rose's face materialized above the table, her final recorded message dated 3 weeks before her death. Marcus's throat tightened. She looked tired in the video, but her eyes still held that sharp awareness that had always seen through every family pretense. "If you're watching this," holographic Rose said, "then I'm dead and you're all pretending to be sad about it. Don't insult me with the performance." Derek's laugh was sharp. Classic mother. Always the dramatic exit. "Derek, shut up and let me speak. You've interrupted me enough over 70 years. Holographic Rose smiled, and Marcus felt his chest ache. "I'm leaving the Westlake property and 50,000 credits to Marcus Chen and Sophia Martinez." The room went silent except for the ambient hum of the building's climate control. "Martinez?" Vanessa's voice pitched high. "Who's Martinez?" Marcus felt every eye turn to Sophia. She looked straight ahead at the holographic display, her face carefully neutral. "Sophia Martinez," Rose's image continued, "worked in my home for 8 years. She was my caretaker, my companion, and the granddaughter I actually wanted to talk to at the end of every day. The Westlake property is a small house by your standards, but it's worth approximately 800,000 credits at current valuation. Plus the 50,000 in direct transfer funds." "What?" Derek was on his feet. "She's giving almost 1 million credits to the help." "Mother, you had a neurological decline. This is clearly..." "I'm not finished," holographic Rose said calmly. "And Derek, I had 4 independent medical scans confirming my cognitive function before I recorded this. Every legal challenge you're already planning will fail. I made sure of it." Marcus watched his brother's face cycle through shock, rage, and calculation in 3 seconds flat. "The house and funds go jointly to Marcus and Sophia because they're married. Have been for 6 months, in case anyone's wondering. I was a witness at their courthouse ceremony. Cried like a baby. Best day I'd had in years." Aunt Linda's hand froze over her tablet. Vanessa's mouth opened but no sound came out. Derek turned slowly to stare at Marcus, his expression unreadable behind the flickering data streams in his contact lenses. "You married the maid," Derek said finally. "You married our grandmother's employee." "I married Sophia," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "And we didn't tell anyone because we knew exactly how you'd react." Sophia stood up smoothly. "I was never the maid. I was a licensed home care specialist with an 8-year contract. And I loved your grandmother more than any of you bothered to." "How convenient," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with synthetic sweetness. "Did you plan this from day one?" Lock down the disappointing grandson and wait for the inheritance? Careful, Marcus said, and something in his tone made Vanessa's smile falter. Richard Hahn's voice cut through the tension. There's more to the will. Significantly more. The holographic display shifted, showing dense legal text scrolling behind Rose's image. Marcus tried to focus on the words, but his attention kept sliding to Sophia's profile, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. The full estate breakdown, Richard said, pulling up a summary screen, includes the Westlake property and 50,000 credits to Marcus and Sophia, as stated. The Riverside penthouse and its contents go to Derek Chin. The investment portfolio, valued at approximately 250,000 credits, is divided between Derek and Linda Chen. Derek's posture relaxed slightly. So Mother came to her senses about the primary assets. Not quite, Richard said. The Riverside penthouse has a remaining mortgage of 400,000 credits. The loan documents indicate your grandmother refinanced it extensively over the past 3 years. The color drained from Derek's face. That's impossible. That property was paid off 20 years ago. Your grandmother took out several equity loans against it. The documents show the funds were used for various purposes, including Marcus's law school tuition, which she paid without his knowledge. Marcus felt the floor tilt. What? You thought you'd earned a full scholarship, Rose's holographic image said gently. You did earn it, sweetheart. But the scholarship only covered 70%. I paid the rest. Anonymously. Through a foundation I set up specifically so you'd never know, Mother. Derek's voice cracked. You saddled me with a property that's underwater by 300,000 credits. You make 400,000 credits a year at your tech firm, Rose said calmly. You can afford the mortgage. Or sell it. Your choice. I wanted you to have something that required actual effort to maintain. Aunt Linda was typing furiously on her tablet. Probably calculating her own inheritance share. What about the investment portfolio? 250 split between Derek and me, that's still 125,000 each. The portfolio exists, Richard said. However, it's currently held in trust with specific disbursement conditions. Derek receives his share only after maintaining continuous employment for 2 years and completing a financial literacy certification. Linda receives hers after 6 months of documented charitable work. That's extortion, Linda said flatly. That's accountability, holographic Rose replied. Something this family could use. Marcus felt Sophia's hand brush against his, a touch so brief it might have been accidental. Except he knew better. He'd memorized every subtle signal of her presence over 4 years of hiding their relationship in plain sight. Derek had moved to the window wall, his reflection ghostly against the city skyline. So the disappointing son and the maid get the only property that's actually worth something, while I get debt and conditions. The property is worth something, Rose's image said, but it's not the most valuable thing I'm leaving Marcus and Sophia. Richard produced a physical envelope from his desk drawer, the paper cream-colored and expensive, completely out of place in the digital forward office. He handed it to Sophia. Your grandmother instructed me to give this to Sophia specifically. To be opened in front of the family. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she broke the old-fashioned wax seal. Marcus moved closer, close enough to smell her perfume, the subtle floral scent that had been part of his daily existence for years. She pulled out a letter, handwritten on paper that probably cost more than his monthly transit pass. Read it aloud, Richard said gently. Sophia's voice was steady, but Marcus heard the emotion underneath. My dearest Sophia and Marcus, if you're reading this in front of my family, then Richard followed my instructions. Good. They need to hear this. Derek made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a snarl. I told you the house and 50,000 credits was your inheritance. I simplified the truth. Sophia, there's a trust fund in your name. 200,000 credits. Managed by Richard, accessible only by you. I established it a year ago. The room erupted. Derek's voice was loudest, but Linda and Vanessa added their own overlapping protests. Marcus just stared at Sophia, watching her process the information with the same careful control she'd shown when his family had treated her like furniture for 8 years. 200,000? Derek's face had gone an alarming shade of red. Mother left the maid 200,000 credits, let her finish, Richard said, his voice carrying unexpected authority. Sophia continued reading. Why Sophia and not Marcus? Because I know my grandson. Marcus would distribute every credit to his clients, his causes, his brother if he asked nicely enough. He has the largest heart and the worst boundaries. Marcus felt his face heat. That was accurate enough to hurt, but Sophia, you understand when to be generous and when to protect. You'll ensure Marcus gets a vehicle that doesn't fail every month. You'll ensure you both have a financial cushion. You'll ensure my great-grandchildren have education funds. Most importantly, you'll ensure Marcus allows someone to care for him occasionally. Love isn't only sacrifice, my dear, it's accepting love in return. Sophia's voice had gone thick with tears, but she kept reading. And Marcus? My sweet boy. I'm leaving you something more valuable than credits. She pulled out a smaller envelope, handed it to Marcus. His fingers felt numb as he opened it. Inside were dozens of printed photographs, physical images on actual paper. Him and Sophia over the years, moments he thought were private, Sophia leaving a note in his jacket pocket at the hospital. Marcus watching her in Grandma Rose's garden, his face openly adoring. The two of them laughing over coffee in the kitchen, their hands almost touching. A blurry image from the hospital after Grandma Rose's first stroke, catching their first kiss in the dimly lit corridor. She was documenting us, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Sophia took the letter back, her fingers brushing his. I took these so you'd remember, you two were always meant to be. From the first day Sophia walked into my home and you stopped mid-sentence when you saw her. From the first time she laughed at your terrible jokes and I saw her fall. This is manipulation, Vanessa said. She's manipulating us from beyond death. You built your love in the margins of my family's cruelty, Sophia read, and somehow it emerged more beautiful than anything they could purchase. Derek, Vanessa, Linda, you're welcome at their home. But you're not welcome to bring your poison. Sophia is the matriarch now. She decides who sits at her table. And I hope she's more forgiving than I would be. The silence that followed felt alive, dangerous. Marcus saw Derek's hands clenching and unclenching, saw Aunt Linda's carefully maintained composure cracking, saw Vanessa calculating their social credit scores in real time through her neural jewelry. A matriarch, Linda said finally. The hired help is now the matriarch of the Chin family. Mother's lost her mind, the scans proved otherwise, Richard said quietly. Every evaluation confirmed her complete cognitive function. Derek turned from the window, and Marcus saw something he'd never seen in his brother's face before, genuine devastation mixed with rage. You played us all. You and her. He gestured at Sophia. This whole time. You were working an angle, no, Marcus said, stepping between Derek and Sophia. This whole time, we were falling in love while your family treated her like she was invisible. While you asked her to bring you drinks without saying please. While Vanessa made her eat in the kitchen instead of at the table. While Aunt Linda called her the girl for 8 years without bothering to learn her name. Don't you dare take the moral high ground, Derek snapped. You lied to us, I protected us, Marcus corrected. Because I knew exactly how you'd react. And I was right, Sophia touched his arm lightly. There's more, she was right. Richard had pulled out another envelope, this one sealed with a biometric lock coded to Sophia's thumbprint. Your grandmother's final instructions, Richard said, indicate this should be opened at home. But she wanted me to tell you, he looked at Derek, his expression neutral. She hoped you'd come to understand why she did this. Eventually, understanding, Derek said, his voice bitter. She wants understanding after destroying my inheritance and elevating the staff. She didn't destroy anything, Sophia said, her voice quiet but firm. She gave you a property and a chance to prove you could maintain something valuable. She gave Marcus the knowledge that she believed in him enough to invest in his education. And she gave me, her voice caught. She gave me a family that chose me. That saw me. That's worth more than credits. How poetic, Vanessa said. Does that speech play well to your caretaker friends? Marcus saw Sophia's jaw tighten, saw the effort it took her to remain calm. He'd seen that same careful control when Vanessa had once told her to use the service entrance during a family dinner party, when Derek had forgotten her name for the 100th time, when Linda had treated her like she was part of the furniture inventory. "We're leaving," Marcus said. "Richard, send the remaining documentation to my secure drop, of course." Richard stood, extending his hand to Sophia first, then Marcus. "Your grandmother was very proud of you both. She told me so repeatedly." In the elevator down, neither of them spoke. The walls were mirrored, showing their reflections multiplied infinitely, and Marcus studied Sophia's face in the endless repetition. Her carefully neutral expression. Her perfect posture. The slight tremble in her hand she couldn't quite control. "Are you okay?" he asked when they reached the ground floor. "Your brother called me the maid 4 times in 30 minutes, Sophia said, her voice steady. "Your aunt called me the help. Vanessa insinuated I seduced you for money. Your family just discovered we've been married for 6 months and that your grandmother trusted me with 200,000 credits." She looked at him, and he saw tears threatening behind her composure. "So no. I'm not okay. But I will be." He pulled her into his arms right there in the building lobby, not caring who saw, not caring about the security cameras or the other professionals streaming past them. She pressed her face against his shoulder, and he felt her finally let go of the control she'd maintained for the last 2 hours. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "Don't apologize for your family. You're not responsible for them." She pulled back, wiping her eyes carefully. "But I am going to need you to explain how your grandmother managed to photograph us kissing in a hospital corridor. She was crafty like that. She was perfect." They took the subway home because Marcus's car had finally died permanently 3 days ago. Its ancient electric motor giving out in a cloud of acrid smoke. The train was crowded with end-of-day commuters, their faces reflecting the blue glow of their personal screens. Sophia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and Marcus thought about the photographs in his pocket, about being seen and documented and loved. 200,000 credits, he said quietly. "I know, you could quit your job. Go back to school. That nursing degree you wanted, I could." She lifted her head to look at him. "Or we could use it to build something." Together, the train lurched, and he steadied them both. "What did you have in mind?" "I haven't decided yet. But your grandmother trusted me to decide. So I will." She smiled, and he saw the woman who'd learned his coffee preference by the second week of working for Grandma Rose, who'd laughed at his terrible legal jokes, who'd kissed him in a hospital corridor and changed everything. "After we opened that final envelope, they got off at their stop." Not yet their stop, he reminded himself. They still lived in his cramped apartment near the courthouse, and walked the 3 blocks to the complex. The building was old enough to lack smart access technology, which meant actual keys and actual locks. Marcus had always found it reassuring, this analog security in a world of biometric everything, inside his 400-square-foot apartment. Sophia kicked off her shoes and curled up on the ancient couch while Marcus made coffee in his dyeing machine. The envelope sat on the counter between them, Sophia's thumbprint lock glowing faintly blue. "Should we wait?" he asked. "For what? I don't know. It feels significant." Sophia pressed her thumb to the lock. It opened with a soft click. Inside were 2 items, a letter and a physical key on a chain. "Welcome home," Sophia read aloud. "Marcus, in the garage you'll find something. I purchased it 3 years ago, kept it hidden. It's yours now." "Sophia, in the garden shed, there's a box. Inside is every recipe I know, including the char siu Derek always requested. It's yours now. Do with it what you will." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Char siu had been Derek's favorite, something Grandma Rose had made for every family gathering. She'd always refused to teach anyone the recipe, said it was hers alone. "The bedroom upstairs, the master bedroom, has new furniture. I selected it imagining you two in it. Building your life. Maybe making me great-grandchildren someday." Sophia's hand went to her stomach in an unconscious gesture that made Marcus's heart skip. "Be happy," she continued reading. "Be outrageously, excessively happy. Love loudly. Let Derek hear your laughter from his mortgaged penthouse. And Marcus? That trust fund Sophia has? There's a provision. If Derek ever, and I mean ever, apologizes sincerely, asks for forgiveness, and proves he's changed, Sophia can give him up to 50,000 credits. Not you. Sophia decides. Because if he's truly changed, he'll accept help from the woman he called the maid. If he hasn't, his pride won't allow it. I'm betting on pride. But I like to hope. Marcus found himself laughing despite the tears on his face. She really did think of everything. There's more, Sophia said. P.S. Marcus, stop crying and go check the garage. They looked at each other in the dim apartment light. We don't have access to the house yet, Marcus said. Richard gave me the access codes. Sophia pulled out her tablet, showing him the property transfer documents. Technically, we could go right now. It's 8 at night. When has that ever stopped us? She had a point. They'd stolen enough midnight moments in Grandma Rose's kitchen, enough early morning conversations in her garden, enough borrowed time in the margins of his family's awareness. The house was a 40-minute train ride to a neighborhood that had resisted the aggressive development pushing through the city. Real trees lined the streets instead of the decorative nanotech versions popular in newer districts. The houses had actual yards, actual gardens, actual space between them. Grandma Rose's place sat at the end of a quiet street, its garden lights creating pools of warm illumination in the darkness. Sophia used her tablet to unlock the front door, and they stepped into a house that smelled like lavender and old books. Marcus had been here 1,000 times, but walking in now felt different. The furniture was the same, the photos on the walls unchanged, but the weight of ownership transformed everything. This was theirs. Actually theirs, garage first? Sophia asked. They walked through the familiar kitchen, past the table where they'd had their first real conversation 8 years ago, through the mudroom to the garage door. Sophia hit the opener, and fluorescent lights flickered on. In the center of the garage sat a vehicle under a cover. Marcus pulled the fabric away and found himself staring at a new model Toyota, fully electric, with a charging port already installed and a giant bow stuck to the hood. She bought you a car, Sophia said wonderingly. 3 years ago, she bought us a car. Marcus ran his hand over the hood, the surface cool and smooth under his fingers. She was planning this for years. The garden shed, Sophia said suddenly. I want to see the recipes. They walked out to the backyard where Grandma Rose's garden still bloomed despite her absence. Someone had been maintaining it, probably the neighborhood kid she'd paid to water everything. The shed door opened to reveal shelves of gardening supplies and, on the workbench, a wooden box with Sophia's name carved into the lid. Sophia opened it with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of recipe cards, each one handwritten in Grandma Rose's careful script. Char siu, soup dumplings, scallion pancakes. Every dish she'd ever made, documented and preserved and gifted. She gave me her food, Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. She gave me the thing Derek loved most and told me I could decide what to do with it. Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What will you do with it? I don't know yet. She touched the top recipe card gently. But it won't be out of spite. That's not what she'd want. They walked back to the house and climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. Sophia was right, the furniture was new, a bed large enough to feel decadent after Marcus's cramped apartment, nightstands with actual drawers, a dresser that matched. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the recipe box. We own a house, we have 200,000 credits in savings, your family knows about us, your grandmother orchestrated the most elaborate revenge plan from beyond death. Sophia started laughing, that deep genuine sound that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. Marcus joined in, the absurdity and grief and joy of the day finally breaking through. When I drove through that storm to the hospital after her first stroke, Marcus said, sitting beside her, I kept thinking, if this is it, if she dies, I need to tell you. I need you to know, I already knew. I think I've known since the flan was 6 years ago, I know. Marcus turned to face her fully. 4 years of wanting you. 4 years of watching you be brilliant and kind and patient with my disaster of a family. They're going to hate us forever, Sophia said. I don't care. I stopped caring the moment you said yes in that courthouse. He kissed her, tasting salt from her tears and coffee from earlier and something essentially Sophia that he'd been memorizing for years. Her hands came up to frame his face, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. We should probably start bringing our things over, Sophia said, very practical. Someone has to be. She smiled against his mouth. Your grandmother imagined us making great-grandchildren in this room. She was very forward-thinking. She was perfect. They kissed again, deeper this time. For years and 6 months of secret marriage and 8 years of careful attraction finally allowed to exist without hiding. Marcus eased her back against the new mattress, and Sophia's laugh vibrated against his lips. We should wait for the movers, she said without much conviction. Probably, be responsible adults. Absolutely. Neither of them moved except to kiss again, to touch without the constant awareness of who might be watching, who might discover them, who might judge. Later, much later, they lay tangled together in the new bed, the room dark except for the garden lights filtering through the windows. Sophia traced patterns on his chest, and Marcus watched her face in the dimness. I love you, he said, because he could, because they didn't have to hide anymore. I know. She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. I love you too. Even though your family is a disaster, they'll come around. Maybe, your grandmother thought Derek might. Eventually, the provision about the 50,000 credits. Marcus thought about his brother's face in the conference room, the shock and rage and something that might have been grief. You think he'll ever apologize? I think pride is a powerful thing. But so is rock bottom. Sophia shifted to look at him. And I think if he does apologize, if he really changes, we should help him. Not because he deserves it, but because your grandmother believed in second chances, even after everything he said today, especially after everything he said today. That's what makes it grace instead of justice. Marcus pulled her closer, breathing in her scent, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his ribs. Outside, the garden rustled in the night breeze, and somewhere in the house, one of Grandma Rose's clocks chimed midnight. We're home, Sophia whispered. Yeah, Marcus said. We really are.